This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
It's the 11th of August. On this Thursday, we thank you for downloading Real Talk. We thank you for being here with us. We appreciate your time. It's the most valuable thing you can give us. We've got a great show coming up today. We'll talk to Jean Charest. He wants to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. That starts with being the next leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, but he's got a tough road to hoe. He knows that. Pierre Poilievre is trending as the favorite in this race, but is he the favorite or favored Conservative candidate among Canadians? There's new polling out that suggests it would actually be, if you'll pardon my interpretation of this, smarter for the Conservatives to choose Jean Charest if they wanted to actually win a general election. Charest polls better with Canadians, while Poilievre is polling better with Conservative Party members. So we're going to ask him about that. I'm looking forward to that conversation. You'll remember it was going to happen last Friday. Mr. Charest agreed to reschedule with us, and that interview's coming up in about 10 minutes. We're also going to talk to Carla Beck. She's the leader of the official opposition NDP in Saskatchewan. She's the MLA out of Regina Lakeview. The Saskatchewan NDP are really pressing the government, Scott Moe's government in Saskatchewan, to do something significant, to do something meaningful, not just about these allegations of abuse at this private Christian school in Saskatoon. We talked to two of their alumni yesterday. What a powerful conversation that was. Our conversation with them literally hours after they launched a $25 million class action against their former school, alleging physical, mental, and sexual abuse. If you missed those conversations yesterday, if you missed that interview with those two students, the former students, you'll want to check it out in our podcast and YouTube archive. We'll talk to Carla Beck about that. And we're also going to touch on some of the other stories making news, including your responses to them by way of emails to us on the show, to talk@ryanjesperson.com. But our hearts are heavy today. And not just because we're Edmonton Oilers fans, not just because we're from Alberta, but I think I'd wager a guess that the majority of you that will catch this show across the country have heard of Ben Stelter. Ben is an incredible inspiration, and it breaks my heart to phrase it like this. Ben was a huge part of the Oilers' playoff run just this last spring, encouraging the team, bringing his enthusiasm, and of course uniting hockey fans across North America and around the world that connected with Ben, his family, and his story. Ben was fighting glioblastoma, which is a form of brain cancer. And his dad, Mike, let us all know, and by us, I mean the collective we, the millions of us that had fallen in love with this little boy, let us know that he passed away last night. The team's captain, Connor McDavid, and the legion of fans, an outpouring of grief yesterday and into today, no doubt. The team rallied around Ben during their run to the Western Conference Final. He was in attendance at many different games. You remember, with Ben in attendance, the Oilers went on a 10-game home winning streak. And who would ever forget his little voice calling out, "Play La Bamba, baby," the Oilers win song. Although small in stature, said the Oilers in a statement this morning, Ben's impact on our team and our community was massive. And so today we, the team here at Relay and at Real Talk, and of course on behalf of the thousands of Edmontonians, Albertans, and Canadians that connected with Ben, send our deepest condolences and much love, not just to the Stelter family, of course, but to everybody else that felt a connection with that little guy. We feel the loss deeply. I can't imagine what his parents are going through right now. His dad saying yesterday that he was the best son he could have asked for. He was his best little buddy. He said our hearts are shattered, and we feel it. Much love to the Stelter family today. You know, it gives me an opportunity to remind you about the amazing work that groups like the Stollery Children's Hospital do? And Ben received incredible care there at the Stollery Children's Hospital. And today's a big day, August 11th. We've been telling you about Miracle Treat Day. And today, our friends at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park are taking every single cent that they raise selling blizzards, not the profits. They're taking every cent. If your blizzard is $4 today, $4 is going to the Stollery Children's Hospital. What a day to honor Ben today. What a day to show some love to Ben's family today. And to swing on by a Dairy Queen in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road and pick up a Dairy Queen Blizzard in support of the Stollery Children's Hospital. It's Miracle Treat Day today, August 11th, and we thank every single one of you that's going to show up and support the Stollery in honor today of Ben. We're going to be talking to Jean Charest in a second. I also want to remind you about some of the other partners that we have here on the show that keep these conversations going, and that includes our friends at Park Power. You know, they're powering our hashtag every single day. The Real Talk RJ hashtag is the best way to reach us on social. It's the best way to grab our attention with your photos and your video, to share your thoughts on the interviews you've heard here on the show. Park Power can bundle your electricity, natural gas, and internet. That saves you money on admin costs. Don't forget, you can compare rates today on their website, parkpower.ca. And when you take your business over to Park Power, make sure you use the promo code 2022-Real Talk to save $70 off your first bill. Now, once you're partnered with Park Power, if you're starting to think solar, these two companies have a great working relationship, Park Power and Kubi Energy. Kubi Energy wants to remind you, not only are they Western Canada's most trusted and Tesla-certified installers, they've also got a great incentive right now. The federal government with this $40,000 interest-free loan. You've heard about this. If you want to put solar on your roof, $40,000 interest-free. Kubi will handle all the paperwork for you. You can get your free quote today. Get the ball rolling at kubienergy.ca. Our first guest this morning has been the Premier of Quebec. He wants to be the Prime Minister of Canada. And, of course, that starts with securing the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. Not without its challenges, obviously. I'm sure he's encountered those before through his political career. We're grateful that Jean Charest made time for us this morning. Where are you coming to us from, Mr. Charest? Well, good morning. Where are we speaking to you at?
Good morning, and then I'm in Toronto right now, and I'll be in Toronto in Burlington and Hamilton today. On the road, campaigning.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously pounding the pavement. I don't know if knocking on doors, you're holding the receptions, you're doing everything you can to convince Canadians that you're the best choice for the Conservative Party of Canada. I wanted to ask you about this polling that was out just yesterday. Pretty interesting. Conducted between August 5th and 7th. I'm sure you've seen the numbers by Leger, and it shows that Pierre Poilievre has 44% support among Conservatives. You're backing considerably lower. Among Conservatives, 14%. But here's the rub. Here's the thing. The poll shows that you're more popular with Canadians, that those that aren't currently holding Conservative Party memberships think that you're a better choice and might be more likely to vote for you. How do you wrap your mind around numbers like these? Do you even pay attention to them?
Well, I do, and there's no absolutes in polling, as you know. I mean, a poll tells a story, but never tells the whole story. But in this case, it's fairly consistent. There has been an Ipsos poll and an Angus Reid poll and now Leger poll. They all point in the same direction. And one of the key issues for those voting in this leadership campaign is winnability. We've lost 3 consecutive election campaigns. I think it's enough. And if we want to win, we need to choose a leader who has the ability of winning across the country. Our base is strong out west in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and but we need Ontario and in Quebec. And that's where I make a difference. That's where I, as a leader, am going to give this party of ours a conservative national majority government as opposed to my rival.
How do you amend or adjust or change your campaign, or do you at all, now that the debates are done, now that we're on the home stretch, now that I'm trying to do the math? I mean, we're just under a month. We're a day under a month away from this vote on September 10th. How do you change your strategy?
Well, we communicate with the members as much as we can to talk about what is the ballot question, and winnability is the ballot question. Who can win a majority government? We all agree that we need to get rid of the Trudeau government. Everyone agree, and not just conservatives, by the way. The whole country is pretty much unanimous of the same mind that this government has run its course. It's been divisive. It has no economic agenda. And I'm presenting a very solid conservative, made in Canada conservative agenda, which includes fiscal conservatism and also developing our natural resources, whether oil or gas or pipelines or mining. An Alberta Accord for Western Canada that would be specific to Alberta, for example, is part of my platform. And I can win in every part of the country that's going to allow us to form government. At the end of the day, our ideas are only worth something if we're able to be a national government. And that's exactly what I offer in this leadership race.
I'm sure you've seen this. I don't know if it I love let's shoot straight. Say how you feel. I know that you probably at this point roll your eyes. You might even bristle a little bit when people talk to you, Jean freaking Charest, and they keep bringing up Pierre freaking Poilievre. But I want to ask you, about this availability he had. He gathered a bunch of supporters instead of showing up at this debate last week. His team got a bunch of people together in Saskatchewan, as you know, and he started taking swipes, not just at you, not just at the debate, but essentially at the organizers. He was taking swipes at the party. He was laughing about it. I want to play a portion of it, and then I want to get your response. This is Pierre Poilievre last week.
Thank you, Saskatchewan. It's great to be back in the God-blessed prairies. Good to be with you. Well, I can tell you there's no place I'd rather be right now. I'm told that I could have, instead of being here with all of you in Saskatchewan, I could have been cooped up in a little hotel room around a small table, listening to a defeated Liberal Premier drone on about his latest carbon tax idea. And I don't know if you've seen the picture of this thing they're putting on. It looks like they're playing a little game of cards, except there are no cards.
All right, so there you have it. Looks like you're playing a little game of cards,
people,
but there's no cards, he says. And I've been waiting almost a week to ask you about that. So what did you think when you first saw that video?
Grow up is my reaction. I mean, this is a leadership race, and in the leadership race, the members vote. The least we owe the members is to participate in debates and actually show up and to defend our ideas. The other part of it is, frankly, attacking your adversaries and personal attacks. I mean, that's been the signature of Mr. Poilievre throughout the campaign. It's been nonstop personal attacks. It's been American-style politics, to be quite direct about it. We don't need this in Canada. We're Canadians. We don't need this style. But, and by the way, I suppose he was in Saskatchewan because strategically he thought that we need to win more seats in Saskatchewan. That's why he went there.
Yeah,
right?
Saskatchewan and Alberta. Yeah.
We really need to win more seats. Oh, we have all the seats in Saskatchewan. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Well,
there's two you can come get in Alberta. There's two up for grabs in Alberta if you want.
Right.
If you want the clean sweep, you'll have to come. Take care of Heather McPherson and Blake Desjardins in Edmonton. But I recognize what you're saying. Obviously, there's a ton of work to do in BC, Quebec, and Ontario, and the Maritimes for that matter.
Do we want to be in government or continue to talk to each other? I mean, that's fine. But he's strategically in Saskatchewan. I mean, of course. I mean, it reflects in the Edmonton debate, we found out he couldn't count to 5 because so I'm sorry if I'm finding it a bit humorous, but at the end of the day, maybe it isn't that funny. At the end of the day, it is about government. This is not student politics. This is real. And the leader of the Conservative Party has a real shot of becoming the next Prime Minister of Canada. And what we know from everything that Canadians are telling us now is that I'm the person who's best positioned to do that and to present a real conservative agenda for the country, which I've done in this campaign. I put out policy and ideas, not just slogans. I'll give you an example on he talks about a carbon tax. Mr. Poilievre won't tell you what he'll do on that. He has a slogan. I mean, like the country needs another slogan, right? We need another leader who's into slogans. So at the end of the day, I hope that the members will look at all of this and ask themselves, what is really important here? a leader who's serious and experienced and can win in the country, or slogans.
Can I ask you about that? And I recognize my question will be less delicate probably than your answer will be, because you don't want to insult voters, but I want to cut to the chase. Is the average voter in Canada, and I'm not talking about just conservatives, is the average voter in Canada, or is the average Canadian smart enough to know the difference between a campaign that's driven just by slogans and hype versus a campaign that actually has policy and ideas? Or do you have to, these days, Mr. Charest, in the United States too, in Britain, do you have to dumb down your politics if you want to win?
I don't know. You don't have to. And by the way, I mean, Mr. Poilievre's a very good communicator. I mean,
sure.
I'm not saying he's smart. He's a good communicator, and he would, have a good, a lot of responsibility in my government. But at the end of the day, believe me, Canadians do draw the difference between substance and the shiny object. But we live, Ryan, it's interesting. If you watch this leadership race, it reflects on the fact that we live in a world of shiny objects. And so there's shiny objects out there. But all of us have learned from our parents that, to beware the shiny objects. It includes, for example, Mr. Poilievre's own obsession with Bitcoin, which is another shiny object. But at the end of the day, this is serious business. And it is about the future of the country and how we can do better. And doing better also includes a national government where Alberta and Ontario and Quebec are at the same table. And I will give you a reminder. When Alberta and Quebec are the same mind, like on the free trade debate of 1988, and fighting against Ontario, because Ontario was against it, the government of Ontario was against it, we get things done. And so that's not just slogans. It's a reminder of the fact that this country really works when we have a national government and a leader. I think it would be a good change in Canada to have a prime minister who's been a premier of a province, understands how the country works, has respect for Alberta, and will make it part of a national government.
I believe that I just heard you say that Mr. Poilievre would have a significant role or a serious role
Sure.
in your government. And a lot of people have asked you quite pointedly, and it feels like you've dodged the question a little bit, whether or not you'd stick around if you didn't win the leadership. In other words, would you seek a role as an elected MP and probably, I mean, if the Conservatives were to form government, a cabinet minister, a senior cabinet minister, though who knows? Are you all in, or are you in if you win the leadership?
Oh, well, that's a good sounding question. I am in. I have been a conservative all my life, Ryan, and my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather. I will continue to be a conservative all my life. That will not change. I'm not going to go out and start another party. There were some people writing about that. And I'm in the middle of a boxing match right now. I'm in the 12th round with 15 rounds. And then you're asking me what I'm going to do after. I'm a conservative and will continue to be. But I'm in the middle of this boxing match right now. The only scenario that I see in front of me is winning that. So being pulled aside in the 12th round, but in the 15-round match, to be asked, what are you going to do? My response to you, Ryan, is I'm a little busy now. If you don't mind, I'm like a little focused on the race that I intend to win.
Fair enough. Let's talk about your carbon tax plan. A lot of people want to know details. The carbon tax is obviously one of the more, what do we call it? When you mention the carbon tax, I know in talk radio, if you mention things like fluoride in the water or carbon tax, you're going to get a ton of calls if you open up the lines because people care about it. It impacts their bottom line. I think some people think that it maybe impacts their bottom line a little bit more than it does, but I digress. It's one of those levers, especially that opposition politicians can pull and torque if they want to get people all riled up. So any proposed change to the carbon tax is going to be of great interest to Canadians. Can you lay out your plan in plain language so we can understand it?
Let's get to the point. I would get rid of Mr. Trudeau's carbon tax on consumption. And I would present a comprehensive approach that would develop carbon capture and storage, which is very important for Alberta. And that technology, we should lead on it, export it to the rest of the world. I would do biofuels, whether blue, biofuels of all nature. I would do hydrogen, blue or green. Small modular reactors, Ryan, I also would do, because we can't get to zero emissions in 2050 without nuclear. And Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, New Brunswick are together and developing small modular reactors, which for the oil patch in particular could be very significant in helping them reduce their carbon emissions. And I would have a levy. I'd take a page out of the book of Alberta, the Alberta government, who has had since 2002 a levy on large emitters. That's the way to go, because the large emitters have the ability, the wherewithal, the expertise to be able to develop the technology that will reduce carbon, which they are doing with Pathways, the common project that they have put forward. And that is the best way for us to deal with the reduction of carbon. Now, we can do it in a smart way. And, Europe is actually in their transition plan using natural gas and nuclear. I mean, if they're doing it and they're supposed to be ahead of everyone else, more of a reason for us to do it. So we can be smart. We can be economically good on it, as we have done before as Conservatives with the Montreal Protocol on reducing CFCs and HCFCs, the most successful environmental treaty in the world. The Clean Air Act of 1990, again, Conservatives, to reduce SO2 emissions that has market mechanisms. So why not steal a page out of the book of Alberta and do the right thing with the levy, and that would be, and all the other measures that we would do, and that's the smart economic way to get to where we need to go.
Do you get the sense that the average Canadian buys in on the idea that pricing carbon is the most effective way to reduce emissions and to answer an obligation, perceived or otherwise, with regards to the global community and the health of the planet?
I think they see it as one of the tools, but certainly not one of the single tools. The other thing they know is that it has to be fair. Mr. Trudeau's carbon tax is not fair for rural Canadians, small and medium-sized businesses either. And I'm not the only one saying that. The Environmental Commissioner put out a report about, I think, 2 months ago, pointing that out. And so rural, farmers are feeling that they're carrying an unfair load with the carbon tax of Mr. Trudeau, and they're right. And that's why we need to change it to something that's more effective.
We've got some questions for you from audience members that are joining us live in our YouTube chat right now. Erica says we hear a lot from conservative politicians talking about conservative values, and she wants to know what your interpretation of those are. What are conservative values? And we've got a similar question here as well from Glenna, who wonders, what does it mean to be conservative, big C, capital C conservative in Canada today? What's your interpretation, your understanding, or your message of conservative values?
Here are my conservative values. I am a fiscal conservatism with a very strong record, by the way, in government of applying fiscal conservatism. Secondly, I believe in a market-based economy. It's called capitalism, and also something extremely important for conservatives. 3, I believe in economic policies that promote economic growth, including oil, gas, pipelines, mining, forestry. That's also a conservative principle. And 4th, I believe in families plural, by the way, as the cornerstone of our society. 5th, I believe in law and order, what we call the rule of law. There cannot be any freedoms in our country without the respect of the law. And I find it objectionable when anyone who's a member of parliament supports an illegal blockade. I think that's wrong. And I accept the fact that people have a right to protest. Frankly, that's also fundamental. But illegal blockades, I feel so strongly about it, I would actually put forward legislation that would give police powers to intervene rapidly and effectively if there are illegal blockades. And finally, Ryan, the 6th value, and they're not exclusive for conservatives, is the way we practice federalism. Conservatives have a very strong, consistent tradition since the foundation of the country of respecting the jurisdiction of the provinces and making this federal system work, contrary to the Liberals. So those are 6 conservative values that I live by.
I want to take you into my email inbox for a second, and don't worry, I'm not going to make it weird. But somebody, this happens to me all the time, and I actually think it's funny. People will sign me up for mailing lists, like it's their way of trolling me. They figure out my personal email and then they sign me up for these. Anyway, I digress. I'm on my former radio colleague Danielle Smith's mailing list right now. And I just wanted to give you an idea of what the emails look like. And there is a point to my question, Mr. Schray. I recognize you're not trying to be the Premier of Alberta. I recognize maybe you don't want to jump into that. But check this out. So the email that I received yesterday, here it is. And, Johnny, you can show it on the screen. It says, say no to the World Economic Forum and the Trudeau agenda, the WEF and the Trudeau agenda. And then I just want to give you a sense, and then I'll get to the question of the words and how these words are torqued and used, right? And so she says this, she goes on, she says, I've been attacked by my friends, Travis Taves, Brian Jean, accused me of endorsing Justin Trudeau's radical green agenda. And then she goes on to say, obviously their accusation is absurd on many levels, but I thought this might be a good opportunity to share my thoughts with you on, and here it is, the dangers of Justin Trudeau's World Economic Forum inspired radical climate agenda and why we need to tackle environmental issues in a much different way, the Alberta way. A lot of people are talking about the World Economic Forum, the WEF, and I'm not sure that everybody understands what it's all about, what it does, who attends, who has attended in past, including conservative prime ministers or representatives of conservative governments. I know that you've said that if you were prime minister, you would have representation in Davos at the World Economic Forum. Can we talk about it, how regular folks would talk about it? And can you give us your take on the World Economic Forum, which is something that a lot of people buzz about, but I'm not sure everybody understands?
I've attended the World Economic Forum. I probably attended 9 consecutive years as Premier. And when I went to the World Economic Forum, actually, I sit in a room for 3 days with meetings every 45 minutes with business leaders from all over the world who did business in my province. And it was very business-like. The forum itself is a forum of people who get together and talk about world issues, period. I mean, and prime ministers. I met Stephen Harper a few times at the World Economic Forum. I met Jim Flaherty. I met a number of ministers at the World Economic Forum. We can very well attend the World Economic Forum where business leaders and NGOs meet and they talk about world issues. And that doesn't affect at all the decisions we make about our own country. It never did. And neither should it affect her. That's period. Now, Mr. Poilievre said he wouldn't send his ministers to the forum or allow them to go to the forum. I mean, frankly, ministers in the government are not brain dead. I mean, they do have an ability to think for themselves. It's not the prime minister's job to put them in a room and protect them from events in life. If that's the case, God save us. If they're not good enough and bright enough to understand that if they attend meetings, they have to think for themselves. So I know some people are concerned about the World Economic Forum. World Economic Forum does not dictate the agenda of Canada. They don't tell us what to do. We decide on our own, as I've always done. And fine, if they want to suggest things and point in certain directions and say these are things that we should be thinking about, like any other think tank, you listen to it and you take what you think is good and you put aside what you think is bad.
Do you think it could be damaging for a nation's brand, or for international relationships, or for how a country is perceived, or perhaps how a world leader is perceived by their colleagues, to not participate or to not attend these types of things, or are we blowing this way out of proportion?
I don't think anyone cares.
Okay.
Then
let's move on. Quite frankly, I'm not sure I would care, but I see a lot of people talking about it. But that's the thing about politics, and I know you know this, and it comes back to the buzzwords and the populism and everything else. Well, you know the World Economic Forum, and most people, if they were honest, would say, actually, I don't really know about the World Economic Forum. I think people think it's like the Illuminati, which is why I wanted to ask you about it. Donna with a pointed question. Would you continue the $10 a day daycare program? Families will want to know what your plan is to make life more affordable.
Absolutely. I would. And I'm the only candidate in this race who has come out squarely and said, Ryan, that I would respect the agreements that were signed by all provinces with the federal government, including Alberta. And let me share my experience with this. When I went to lead the Liberal coalition of Federalists in Quebec, because it's a coalition of Federalists. This idea sure is a Liberal. There was no Conservative Party in Quebec at the time. And I went to fight back against another referendum. But when I did, Ryan, they had just implemented this, it was $5 a day daycare program in Quebec. And I expressed reservations about it because I'm a fiscal conservative. And I got skewed over it. But you know what? After the implementation of it and after experiencing it, and I added family allowances that were non-taxable also, and we expanded and adapted the family leave program, what we discovered is this. It actually economically makes a lot of sense. It allowed working women, from the ages of 25 to 54 to choose. I'm going to choose, and I'm going to be clear on my words here. No one's forced. You can choose to go back into the labor market because daycare is more accessible and affordable. It's probably the number one obstacle for families who are trying to decide to have a child, whether they'll have access to daycare or not. And it also reduced poverty. It also allowed families to increase their disposable income. It also increased the birth rate. So it's a policy that makes economic sense. And if you're looking for someone to corroborate that, Steve Poilievre, who was until recently the governor of the Bank of Canada, was never fired, by the way. He just retired out of his mandate. He wrote a book recently about, I think it's The Age of Uncertainty is the title. Very good book. And he talks about the Quebec daycare policy that was economically very productive in producing jobs. We have labor shortages, Ryan. We have labor shortages. We need to do everything in our power to offer choice to people to get back into the labor market, and women in particular. And so this policy does make economic and social sense.
This is a political question, but it's also kind of a personal question. We got an interesting email from someone following the former Prime Minister Stephen Harper's endorsement of Mr. Poilievre. And this person said that they thought it was actually mostly a big FU to you. And they talked about, and I want to pick your brain on this if you're willing to talk about it. People said back in the day, Jean Charest really, if I can speak openly and candidly, Jean Charest really pissed off Stephen Harper because he convinced him. He sort of, you in a way, you Jedi mind tricked Stephen Harper about Quebec's fiscal situation, and you convinced Mr. Harper to give Quebec a sweetheart deal, and that Mr. Harper has had an axe to grind in your direction ever since. Can you take us behind the scenes? Can you take us behind the curtain about the dynamic of that relationship, you and former Prime Minister Harper, and what you made of his endorsement of the person you're opposing in this leadership race?
I have a lot of respect for Mr. Harper. I think he's been a good prime minister. And fine, he can make whatever choice he wants in this leadership race. But about the party and the choices, just let's all remember, a political party is a living institution that evolves with time, have like-minded people who share common values, and every leader marks the party. The party, I'll tell you what the party is not. It's not a franchise that anyone owns. That's not what it is. And anyone, if you think it's that, you're really on the wrong track. That's not how you build for the future. That being said, Mr. Harper and I had a disagreement because there was this fiscal imbalance between the federal government and provinces, not just Quebec. In other words, and what was that about? It was about the government of Canada taking more money out in taxation and not allowing the provinces to have the resource they need to deliver things like, guess what? Healthcare. Sound familiar? 2007, Mr. Harper responds by saying, we're going to transfer more money. And guess what? And this is a fascinating story for conservatives. I had promised to reduce taxes, so part of that money was used to reduce personal income taxes. And here we have a conservative opposed, including Mr. Poilievre, to reducing personal income taxes. It's a little difficult to follow. Now, what was the consequence of that? During the Great Recession of 08-09, Quebec's economic performance was better than the rest of Canada, Ontario, the United States, and Europe. Why? Well, the credit rating agencies said it was because we had reduced personal income taxes for the middle class and lower middle class people who had lower incomes up to $2,000. And that was one of the key drivers of having a better economic performance. Do I have any regrets of behaving like a conservative, Ryan? The answer is no. Would I do it again? The answer is yes, I would do it again because it was the right thing to do for taxpayers.
Let me ask you this then. I mean, you said earlier in this interview that it'd be beneficial for the next prime minister, the next leader of the Conservative Party of Canada to have been a former premier. What was it, a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, something like that?
Yeah.
Premier Horgan hosted the premiers, as if I need to tell you, in BC, and they threw a lot of bombs at the federal government. They called out the federal government, and not everybody agreed. I mean, one of our regular commenters on this show, Supriya Dwivedi's rolling her eyes so hard she's getting a migraine. She's saying it's not. She's saying it's not the federal government's fault that the provinces have bungled their COVID response, or that Alberta can't find $4 billion or what have you. I'm really curious to know, you, a former premier, how would you have responded to the call out, to the criticisms from those premiers aimed at the federal government if you were the prime minister? How would you handle that?
Well, the premiers are right. When Medicare was started, the federal government funded 50% of it, and now they're down to 20%, and they're missing in action. And it's such a typical story, Ryan. Federal government starts program, they're funding it half, and then something happens, they reduce their funding, and they leave the provinces holding the bag. There you have it. And now, what do the provinces say when the federal government reduces its spending? Do they close the emergency room and tell folks, I'm sorry, the feds have reduced spending and we can't treat you? Come back when they increase their, and the real story, the frustration, I think, with the premiers was that Mr. Trudeau is just not responding. He's not. Since when is it an option not to respond when the premiers of the country are saying to you, live up to your responsibilities? And I think they're right. And then you hear the federal minister of health, Ryan, of all things, say, well, we'll increase, but there'll be conditions because we want to run part of the healthcare system. I thought to myself, God save us. The folks who are running the passport offices now want to run emergency rooms. If that's the case, God protect us, because they can't even run the airports and passport offices and the immigration, and they want to now interfere in healthcare. This is a key issue in the country, by the way. In the first 6 months of my election as prime minister, I would bring together a first ministers conference with the Council of the Federation. This would be on the top of the agenda. I would change the Canada Health Act. I would open it up to allow provinces to innovate. I would allow them to use private sector delivery. And I want to be very clear, while remaining universal and a single payer. So no one puts any money on the table. You don't have to pay, but we could very well effectively use private sector delivery, like clinics for hip and knee replacements. Have doctors do that. Do a contract with the government in Alberta, say we'll do 1,000 cases a year. We'll do the diagnostic, the operation, post-op, and the treatment. We'll take them out of the hospital system. It'll be more cost effective. It'll be more rapid. It'll be much more productive. And that way, when people walk into hospitals in Alberta for a hip replacement, they won't be told on that day, well, we're sorry, it's going to be delayed another 4 months because we have this emergency happening or that emergency happening. You allow the hospitals to treat heavier cases. That's the kind of thinking that we need if we're going to make this healthcare system of ours work.
I want to thank your team for letting us know behind the scenes that we had a few extra minutes to talk to you. I want to thank you for your time into overtime on this interview. I want to wrap with this from Sharon, who says that Conservatives typically don't have a good record of working with Indigenous people in Canada. How would Mr. Charest move forward the TRC, Truth and Reconciliation Commission, calls to action, and what would he do with regards to justice for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls?
Very difficult issue for the country. And we have to, first of all, Mr. Trudeau has jacked up expectations beyond, and things like potable drinking water haven't been addressed. I think we have to sit down with our Indigenous population and leaders and the communities and look at what the issues are. My first area of preoccupation is to also develop an economic base for the communities so that they can grow and they prosper and that they can have a good life. And yes, we need to address the issues of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the recommendations and do it in a way that is timely, Ryan. But in the longer term, again, here's something to steal out of the page of Alberta. Alberta put together a crown corporation to allow Indigenous communities to invest equity in projects. I think the federal government should do the same thing. When I was premier, I had, I think, a very good relationship with the Indigenous communities. We did Plan A, but it was a very inclusive relationship, and one that, of course, is based on respect. But please, let's control expectations and get things done rather than just talk about these things and do virtue signaling and just spend our time telling each other we have our back, when in fact we should also have enough wherewithal to actually solve things like potable drinking water.
Mr. Charest, it's always a pleasure to connect. I wish you all the best leading up to the Conservative Party members' vote on September 10th.
Thank you, Ryan. And to those who are members and listening, please vote. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You got it. That's Jean Charest, former Premier of Quebec, wants to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. I saw a note from Air Mitch in our live chat. He says, another day, another Conservative guest. Air Mitch is going to be excited about our next guest.
You'd think there was a leadership race going on.
You'd almost think there was a leadership race, and we were talking to the candidates. Still waiting to hear back from Mr. Poilievre's team.
Yeah.
We're hoping to have him on the show. I'd love to have him on the show. I'd love to have a candid conversation where we can ask real questions like we just did here with Mr. Charest. Coming up in just a second, we're going to talk to the leader of Saskatchewan's official opposition. She's the NDP leader and the elected MP out of Regina Lakeview. Carla Beck's going to make her Real Talk debut in just a quick second. First, I want to remind you that for more than 160 years, Covenant Health has been making a huge difference for patients and loved ones, in particular, people that are relying on life-changing care with state-of-the-art equipment, enhanced care spaces, and innovative approaches to care at the Misericordia and Grey Nuns hospitals. Now, why does this matter to you today? Well, for the last 30 years, Covenant's Foundation Lottery has played a huge role in making a difference for those in their care, and your ticket purchase will have a far-reaching impact. Oh, yeah, and you might have a chance to live in life-changing luxury in a $2.2 million dream home. You can tour the home, you can see all the details, and most importantly, you can buy your tickets today at covenantfoundationlottery.ca. We want to remind you, as you prepare for the weekend, you get set to fire up that grill, whether it's the I'm drawing a blank. What's it called? The star fruit? What's it called again, Johnny? The steaks that you have? Jackfruit. Whether it's, I was doing so well up into the jackfruit steaks, or whether it's the old school T-bones, or whether it's Alberta pork, chicken, turkey, whatever. Maybe you're going to do that if you're like me, you like to lengthwise slice the fresh zucchini, slather it in some olive oil, crack some pepper, and maybe a little bit of coarse sea salt on it. Is there anything better than grilled zucchini? I don't think so. Portobello mushrooms, maybe. You'll find it all at Friesen Brothers. You can find them online at friesen.com and at 16 different Alberta communities. For those of you watching on YouTube right now, you can see that's Johnny's very good steak from the butchers at Friesen Brothers.
There it is.
You put barbecue sauce on that, or are they seasoned in the
they're
package?
seasoned, and they've got some sort of sauce on them to make them sort of barbecue-y, but of course, we always lather on the extras there.
You got to throw a little extra sauce on there. Hey, if you're an engineer and you're feeling, let's be honest, a little unfulfilled right now in your current job, maybe you don't feel challenged, maybe you don't feel like there's opportunities for you to reach your maximum career potential, maybe you just look at the clients you're working with and quite frankly, you're bored stiff. Apex Automation wants to talk to you. They are looking for the most talented, skilled, team-playing engineers in the country. Right now, they're hiring at the careers link at apexautomation.ca. They're giving people back their time. That's their clients and their team members at Apex Automation. And this next interview is brought to you by our friends at Local Environmental Services. They're operating across Alberta and Saskatchewan, including Regina. Right now, if you're looking for temporary or more permanent front-load bins, roll-off bins, maybe you're looking to ramp up your recycling programs in your business or in your community, maybe it's water hauling, maybe it's fencing, portable toilets, what have you, Local Environmental does it all as a family-owned business. Keep it local at localenvironmental.ca. A powerful conversation yesterday on the show with two alumni of a Saskatoon private school alleging serious and sustained abuse, physical, mental, sexual abuse. More than 18 students. We're waiting for the number as this class action continues to grow. A $25 million suit launched yesterday about a school. This is a school, a private school that has been receiving private funding, public funding as well, almost $1 million last year from Saskatchewan's provincial government. And of course, the allegations are extremely troubling. People are calling for investigations by police. People want a full-blown government investigation. And of course, public school advocates are asking, rather demanding, action from governments on more of a public conversation about how these schools are funded. Now, of course, a lot of this conversation is being driven by Saskatchewan's NDP. That's the opposition party in that province. Carla Beck is the NDP leader in the province of Saskatchewan. She's the elected MLA for Regina Lakeview. Before we get into the serious stuff, though, here's the deal. Carla's come to us not from her home province of Saskatchewan, but from way out east at the Canada Summer Games, and I wanted to give you a chance right out of the gates to pump the tires of somebody that I know you're very close to. Tell us about Carter.
Oh, well, I'm out here. Thanks for that, Ryan. I'm out here watching my nephew Carter play in the Saskatchewan, for Team Saskatchewan in baseball. They've got a day off today and head into the playoffs tomorrow night at 7. They've been having a great tournament. They finished second in their pool and will be going into that game on Friday with a lot of support both here in Niagara Falls and back home in Saskatchewan. So I want to wish him and all of the team just the best of luck. It's a great group of kids.
Well, I wanted to make that note right out of the gates because I know that this is supposed to be your time off, and I know that you're out of the province, and we really appreciate you making time for us today. This story is obviously very serious. It's extremely troubling. These are allegations, including sexual abuse allegations that have surfaced in some circumstances after more than 20 years. A $25 million class action leveled against the school formerly known as Christian Center Academy in Saskatoon, now known as Legacy Christian Academy. The stories are very powerful ones. Let me ask you generally out of the gates how you're wrapping your mind around it and what your initial response was when you first heard from these former students.
Yeah, the allegations are horrifying. To think that any child would be subject to abuse is heart-wrenching. As a parent, as a former social worker and children's counselor, that it's horrible. It's horrifying to think that this could have happened to any child, but to think that it happened at school, these allegations happened in school. We're hearing more and more every day come out, allegations of physical, now sexual abuse as well. It really is horrifying and is something that we've been coming out very strongly, demanding answers, demanding action from the minister. Something that it appears he's had to been dragged to do anything about. Today we did hear some appointment of oversight, but he's known about these allegations since June, and it is. It's something that we will continue to demand answers around. This should not happen. Every child in school should be safe, and this is something the minister really should be taking out every stop in order to ensure that this never happens again.
I want to clarify what we've heard from your party with regards to freezing funding for this school. Is this opening up a bigger conversation, in your understanding, in the province of Saskatchewan around funding for private schools? It's obviously a hot button issue. It's an issue here in Alberta right now. A lot of the political candidates seeking leadership of the United Conservative Party are really focusing on education and education funding, but they're moving more in the direction of sending more to private schools, of opening up more private and charter options. It seems to be resonating with people perhaps more in rural communities. That's my impression. Where would you like to see the funding conversation go in Saskatchewan?
Mm-hmm. Well, in specifics with this case, what we've called for is a freeze to funding to this particular school while these allegations are on the table. In terms of a broader conversation, underfunding of our publicly funded system, both the public system and the Catholic system in this province, is a problem that dates back really to the early days of this Sask Party government. For the last 10 years in this province, we've seen per pupil funding for the publicly funded, publicly delivered system fall. So you have a generation of kids who will be going into the fall into this fall, into grade 12, who really have seen only declining support and declining funding through their whole school career. And that really is a huge issue. Underfunding of that publicly funded system, leads people to be concerned about quality of education. And I think the focus really has to be on ensuring that kids who are attending, be it the public system or the Catholic system, have what they need. And frankly, they don't right now in this province. And I really would like to see, it's what got me into politics. I started as a school board trustee 2 terms back in 2009, and it was my frustration over the underfunding then in 2015 that led me into provincial politics, and it hasn't gotten better. And I think that really is, part of the pressure we see here is this is a government that has terribly underfunded the public system for a decade.
I've been my background, just so you know, like my maternal grandfather was chair of the Calgary Catholic School Board. My mom and her 2 sisters, all teachers. I grew up with a great appreciation of education. My mom taught in the public system. Her sister taught public, and her other sister ran and owned her own charter school. So we saw it kind of from different angles. I attended private school up until I attended public school. I attended private university and public university. I've kind of seen it all. And I've tried to reconcile my thoughts on how education funding should go. And on one hand, I do still, I feel like this conversation needs to be an hour and a half long, and typically over beers or coffees. But I do believe that parents should have choice in where they send their kids. And I do believe there should be some funding allocated to private schools because parents pay taxes. And I do think that some of the taxes they pay should support their choice. And then I think those private schools should have to carry the rest of the load. At the same time, we know that the public system is underfunded. We see evidence of it all the time. We know of the importance of public funding, and we know that there needs to be more robust funding. And we hear stories like we heard on this show yesterday about what sounds like a complete lack of standards in this private school, where it is alleged, and I'm not sure I have any reason to believe it's not true, it's alleged that teachers at that school weren't even certified, that there was no oversight, that there was no accountability. And of course, that's completely unacceptable. So I get all twisted up in conversations like these. Do you feel the same way yourself? I mean, is it cut and dried, black and white to you, or is this something that you wrestle with, even as a former trustee?
Well, the first thing, is the funding of the publicly funded, publicly delivered system. It simply is inadequate right now. In the province, we have a long history. We've got historical high schools. I grew up in Lang, really close to Notre Dame College in Wilcox, just a little bit down the highway. Great quality education. We've got Luther College in Regina. This wasn't an issue. For many years in the province, we've had some private schools that have functioned with very high academic standards, oversight, all of those things. I think what we've seen in the last 10 years, again, has been a real underfunding and basically, there's even been hostility, it seems, sometimes from this provincial government towards school boards, towards teachers, and a real expansion of private schools and new categories of schools, which I think we're seeing right now has not come with an adequate level of standards or oversight, something that the minister is trying to hurry up and fix a little bit of that. But, he really had to be dragged to this. Again, this is something that's been on his desk, these particular allegations, since June. It really speaks to a lack of oversight. When I was on the public school board in Regina, we had associate schools, some really great schools, high academic standards, good community support. This isn't, painting with the same brush all of these schools, but I do hold the minister accountable for sitting on these allegations, for presiding over this expansion without the proper oversight. And I think that really is at the crux of the issue here, as well as the underfunding of the public system.
You're still serving as education credit, correct?
I'm not.
Oh, did you
I had
step
to
out?
get that. Just for the leadership, I held that portfolio for 6 years, and it was very difficult to give up. The relationships, the That's my passion. I've always said that if you could create a province where all kids had the chance to thrive, I think you really would have done something. I've handed it over to my colleague Matt Love, who was a teacher for many years, and he's done a great job with it. But certainly, it still holds a lot of passion for me. And again, at the very least, as a province, as a society, we need to be ensuring that kids have that chance to thrive. And it pains me to even say it, but that their human rights are respected and that they're safe in their schools. That really has to be at the bottom line, and something that it appears the minister has failed at. Very spectacularly.
When we asked to speak with you yesterday, you let us know that you're an ardent podcast consumer, that you listen to podcasts a lot, and we sure appreciate that. I don't know if you heard Brian Topp, typically a federal NDP strategist, but he of course was on Rachel Notley's staff for some time in Alberta as well. He talked to my pal David Hurley on the Hurley Burley podcast a few weeks ago. It was actually fascinating. Topp is a really smart guy, regardless of where you lean politically. He's a smart guy. Here's the point of the question. He started talking about the dynamics in Western Canada and where it's realistic that provinces could see NDP governments. Obviously, BC has one right now, and there's a race to replace John Horgan, who, of course, due to personal health issues, won't be seeking re-election. In Alberta right now, pretty interesting race, and I'm very curious to get your take on that. Rachel Notley's just kind of, I think, watching right now. She wants to be premier again. She's watching to see what happens with the United Conservatives. And then a year later, after Alberta votes in 2023, Saskatchewan voters will go to the polls 2024. And I know you've been, since you secured the leadership of the Saskatchewan NDP, have been touring that province on, what did you call it, like a goodwill tour or something like that. Give me your impression. We've seen NDP, some action. We've seen some progress in Manitoba as well. What's your assessment, not just of Saskatchewan, but of Western and Central Canada and what it could look like over the next couple of years?
Mm-hmm. So there's a bit to unpack there.
There is.
Definitely. I did hear that that podcast. It's the Building to Win tour. We kicked off right after the leadership. We're down to a cattle ranch. A woman who went to school with my brother. And then up to PA. I think we put 1,000 kilometers on that first day. So a lot of kilometers. I think we're up over 15,000 touring the province and listening to podcasts along the way. And certainly a lot going on, as you said. I want to first, I'm not sure if he's listening, but wish John well and understand the reasons that they're kicking off a leadership campaign there in BC. But there is a lot going on. I know next door in Alberta, I don't know, Ryan, if you know this, I've got a daughter who lives in Alberta, so I get over there once in a while, exciting things happening there. But one of the things that we're hearing when we're out, after 2.5 years of a pandemic, of course, being on the road, first of all, just feels like a luxury and feels like, the best thing we could be doing. Is connecting with people. And what we're hearing the last 2.5 years, have been difficult, have been strange for people, and in many cases have caused them to think about what's important, and that change momentum, I think, is out there. They're looking for a different kind of leadership. They're tired of division. That's something I'm hearing, no matter if I'm, down on the ranch in southern Saskatchewan or up north or in the cities. People are tired of short-term divisive politics, finger pointing. I think we've heard more than one time they're looking for grown-ups in the room who are prepared to be accountable, to roll up their sleeves, dig in, look for solutions instead of pointing fingers. And I think that maybe is something we're seeing certainly right across Western Canada, a want of a different type of politics, people who will, again, be accountable, be out there looking people in the eyes, getting to those tables, no matter who's at the tables, and finding solutions and delivering for people instead of just, yelling at each other on Twitter espousing rhetoric. So that's the path that we're taking. I think that there's a lot of room for it out there, and I think the pandemic shook people loose a bit in many different ways.
Yeah, we just had, right before we talked to you, we had an interesting conversation with Charest, and I was asking him if he thinks that, I asked the question like a bit of a prick, to be honest. I asked him if he thinks that the average Canadian is smart enough to be able to identify the difference between a campaign that's driven by slogans and buzzwords and populism versus a campaign that's actually motivated and driven and supported by policy. And of course, he wanted to answer, it kept it classy. But I'm not so sure, actually, and it's kind of discouraging. And, an example right now in Alberta, probably, I guess, the perceived front runner to be the next premier is talking about this Sovereignty Act, where Alberta would just tell Ottawa to buzz off and pick and choose which laws it obeys. And we've got legal experts and constitutional experts saying that's not a thing. That's not how this works. But it's resonating, and people seem to love it. And you've been actually quite critical of Premier Moe and his government's, what I guess they're calling them, the provincial autonomy meetings. Which is, I guess, if you had to pick the top two most strained provincial relationships with the federal government, it would probably be Alberta and Saskatchewan, wouldn't it? How do you perceive Saskatchewan's relationship with Ottawa, and what would you do differently?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that divisiveness certainly applies to a number of politicians, but I have been very critical of Premier Scott Moe for yelling on Twitter or, flipping tables, but not actually being at the tables and getting what is needed for people in Saskatchewan. The divisive nature. You asked an interesting question. I won't repeat all of what you said in your lead up to that. Are people smart enough? I think people are. I do think that if you're just looking at high level messaging, it's difficult for people to connect with. They can tune it out. That's why we've really put so much of a focus on actually getting out in front of people, talking to them, making those connections. That anger is real out there. There is a sense of alienation or a sense of not being heard. In Saskatchewan, in Alberta, I'm sure similar, by the government in Ottawa, by some of the federal parties. That part is real. So I think as leaders, we have an opportunity and frankly a responsibility to understand those concerns and do something productive with them. And what we're seeing, I'm afraid, in too many instances, is taking that anger and using it for short-term political benefit, which I think makes all of us weaker, makes us weaker provincially. We don't have our needs understood or represented at the federal table, but it also makes for very difficult conversations. There's this heightened sense of anger in some places. One of the main comments that I started to hear in the leadership was how many people had really a difficult Christmas where they had someone at their table who wasn't at that table because they simply, political divisions had been inflamed so much that the people were missing. And that was really concerning for people.
That's real.
Again, we have a responsibility, I think, as leaders to, there's a choice. You can either heighten that frustration and lean into it, or you can try to connect with people and build solutions. And that's the path that we've taken.
Every single person that listens to this, I guarantee, would be able to provide their example of how their cost of living's gone up. To be candid, to be real, we opened up our mortgage renewal offer yesterday from our bank. I've banked with them since I was 6 years old, and it's a kick in the teeth. It's brutal, actually, and we'll find a way as a family to make it happen. It's costing everybody more at the pumps. It's costing everybody more with groceries. It's costing everybody more everywhere. This is a story that I'm not going to try to draw a direct line, but I think that Canadians would probably be interested. I've seen this described as Saskatchewan's version of Bev Oda's $16 orange juice. This is probably, to be honest, a bit of a softball I'm throwing you, Ms. Beck, but the finance minister says that spending $8,000 on a private flight to make her way from Regina to North Battleford to attend a 2-hour lunch was worth it. this, as residents of Saskatchewan, are looking for answers from the government on what the Saskatchewan Party will do to address cost of living challenges. What's your impression of that story? That's the softball. And the tougher one is, what would you do differently to make life more affordable for people in Saskatchewan?
Mm-hmm. I appreciate both the question and the ball reference. This is something I was just talking to someone earlier today. Even out here in Ontario, there are a bunch of Saskatchewan folks out here, as I mentioned. This is still causing anger. This $8,000 flight, and as you said, sometimes it's the smaller things, be it a $16 glass of orange juice or an $8,000 flight. When this story broke, we happened to just be going from North Battleford up to Onion Lake. I think the trip cost us a $77 tank of gas. This is something people know, that a 4-hour trip shouldn't cost $8,000. And the minister, frankly, this minister who in March delivered a budget that increased fees and taxes for Saskatchewan people 32 times in that budget alone, doubled down the next day and said that, she didn't regret it. She would do it again. She was tired, and, that she struggled too because she wanted a bigger house and couldn't afford one. I think this was an example, but really emblematic of a government that in so many instances is out of touch. We have a premier who has said he doesn't care on the emissions file. We've got, again, a minister of education who took a month to do the right thing or even come out and talk about these allegations of abuse. We've got a healthcare minister who no one has seen since we were in session. This is, as I said, I think indication of a government that's tired and out of touch. Not only that $8,000 flight, the 32 fees and taxes, we've seen them in recent months increase Sask Power bills by 8% and our energy bills by 23%. As you know, people are facing 40-year record inflation. They are having to renew mortgages. We had to do the same thing this spring as well. It's a government that has lost the plot here in the province. In terms of things we can do, it definitely is the case that this is an issue right across the country, but also across the country, we are seeing other governments at least try to acknowledge that this is a huge pressure. We've seen Alberta on 2 different occasions bring in measures to address affordability. We've made calls for a freezing of the gas tax over the summer, something that they talk about on a federal level. The Sask Party could do that tomorrow, freeze those gas taxes, looking at a windfall levy for record profits as we're seeing in oil and gas and potash in the province, and return some of those dollars back to the shareholders of those resources in the province. We've been very propositional on this. Our finance critic, Trent Witherspoon, going back to March, we've done a number of press conferences making specific calls, not reckless or outrageous calls, but things that would actually benefit people as they are going into summer, should have already been in their pocket. And we've seen a government that has flatly refused to take any of those measures.
I'll be honest, this next question, and it'll be my last one. I know you've got stuff to do, and we're past the time we asked you to stay, but my understanding of how these are all structured, I may get exposed here, Carla, is what I'm saying, because I may not fully understand it. But I've always found it fascinating that Saskatchewan, there's been NDP governments in Saskatchewan. There's the whole Tommy Douglas, obviously there's deep roots, but it's right now, conservative support in Saskatchewan is huge, provincially and federally, has been for quite some time. And I have a hard time reconciling that with provincially owned, and here's where I might get burned, provincially owned entities like SaskTel, Sask Power, SGI Insurance. It's all provincially owned, right? It's all publicly owned, isn't it? Similar to BC. Isn't that strange in a province that's so ardently conservative and you would think would sort of have more of a business that we look like what Ralph Klein did with privatization, with opening things up? How much longer do you think the province of Saskatchewan will regulate and own virtually everything?
Well, it's funny, this is the Sass party going back to, back two leaders have tried to take different shots at our crown corporations in the province, corporations that have been innovators, that have delivered, not only low utility rates to people of the province, but billions in dividends back to the people of the province and good jobs. They've tried a few times. But what they fail to understand, I think, many times the Sass party is just how valued these crowns are by people in the province. They really do allow us when we have governments that have an interest in doing that, to provide not only low utility rates, as I said, but dividends to the province. It is, something that the people of Saskatchewan value. As I said, they've lost elections before when they've gone after our crown corporations. I hope that is, something that they're not lining up again. But again, we've seen the Sass party try to go at our crowns in many different ways. Stealthy privatization has been something they've been doing all along. But something that I think they've underestimated how much the people of Saskatchewan value these crown corporations. I think we could utilize them better for the benefit of the people of this province, which is something definitely that we would look to do were we to form government.
I know that there's Albertans that are looking to the left and to the right of them. I'm talking geographically, not politically. That take a look at ICBC and SGI, and they've seen that their car rates, insurance-wise, in Alberta, in some circumstances, we've heard from people. Some people send us receipts, right? Like they send us the actual, not the pink slips, but they send us the invoices. They prove to us. I've seen evidence. People's car insurance has gone up 40, 50, 60% with no accidents, no tickets. They're wondering what the hell is going on. And they take a look at ICBC and SGI, and it looks pretty good. I wonder if the government in Alberta would ever make a move back that way, maybe under Rachel Notley. Who sees? Remains to be seen. Sure appreciate your time. All we do is we open up cans right at the end of the interview to guarantee that you'll come back and talk to us again.
Now I've got a longer conversation that we have to have sometime, but I really appreciate the chance to be here. I'll just end. I've got a kid in Alberta and in BC, and very thankful that they still can have their SaskTel and their SGI plans while they're out there, because it really does provide that value. But we can talk more later. Oh yeah, I mean, I see students all the time still rocking the Saskatchewan plates. I know why they're doing it. Those are some sharp knives in that drawer right there. Carla Beck is the MLA out of Regina Lakeview, the relatively new leader of Saskatchewan's NDP, the official opposition, and a proud Real Talker. Thanks for making time for us. We appreciate it. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, you bet. I like that comment. There's one from Luke in our live chat here. Luke goes back to the school funding thing, and he says, I get why some would argue for parents being able to have some say over where their funding goes, like their taxes go, Luke says. So, and here's the rub, and Luke's not wrong. Luke says, so as a childless person, can I opt out of paying for that portion of my taxes completely? And then he has that emoji, the chin rubbing, says Luke. I've heard a rebuttal to that argument because that one comes up frequently, right? Mm-hmm. If I never use the hospitals, if I don't use public transit, if I don't use, if I'm not a parent, if I don't have kids in school, and someone said, well, hey, listen, someone floated your education tab when you were in school, and now you're paying it back. We pay for you may not drive on the road that you're paying to have the potholes replaced in, but maybe you will one day. And that's the whole thinking, right? Yeah, and I don't think we want an uneducated public either. That's when we really get burned. That's my first time talking to Carla Beck. I appreciate her. Yeah, she's and also it didn't hurt that when we reached out and I said, Ms. Beck, I'm the host of Real Talk, and she writes back. She says, I listen to Real Talk all the time. I was like, unreal. Let's do it. Well, let's talk. Doesn't? So thanks, Johnny. Hope to speak to Premier Scott Moe sometime soon. That'll be a good conversation as well. Maybe we'll get the two of them on the show together leading up to the next provincial election in Saskatchewan, see how that goes. Lots to talk about, and sure appreciate all of your feedback here. We're going to leave some material on the table because we're already locking and loading for Friday's show. It's going to be a good one. Before we go, I want to remind you how proud we are to partner with our friends at Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge, and they wanted us to remind you that we have these conversations about cost of living, and one of the ways that it really slaps us in the face, one of the ways that we're really reminded of increased cost is at the pumps, right?
prices have dropped a little bit, actually, it seems. We filled up for like $1.59 a liter the other day, but that's still a lot, isn't it? If your family's looking at what you're paying to get around, maybe a road trip through the summer, and you're looking to downsize, they've got some great options at Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge. Yeah, they have the heavy haulers if you need to pull your trailer, but they've also got the complete Chrysler, Jeep, and Ram lineup, including fuel-efficient and even electric options like that Wrangler 4xE. It's my favorite new Jeep. You can talk to the teams at Sherwood St. Albert Dodge today, online or in person. You make sure you let them know that Real Talk sent you. And we keep waving this flag because it's true. It's not too late to get in touch with the team at Eden Landscaping and bring your outdoor space to life. It's not too late to get that retaining wall fixed before there's another 3 feet of snow on it. Sorry, but it's coming. And further damage is done to the landscape. It's not too late to get the excavation done to run the natural gas line to heat your garage. It's not too late to get started on that outdoor kitchen so when the Chinook rolls through this winter, you can throw a pizza in your new outdoor Forno oven and impress your friends. You can get in touch with Mike and his team at Eden Landscaping today online at landscapeedmonton.ca. Well, you know where I'm going today. It's August 11th. I have 2 dates. Number 1, grabbing blizzards today at some point. It's Miracle Treat Day at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton in Sherwood Park. I don't even need the ad read, Johnny. We can give me the rap music. I'm just WRAP, that is. WRAP. 2 things today. I'm going to go pick up a blizzard at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton in Sherwood Park in support of the Stollery Children's Hospital and in honor of Ben Stelter. Ben, rest in power. And to the Stelter family, our love to you. And I'm on my way right now to the Let's Grow Canada conference. We're going to find out who's speaking for the middle and if there's a role for centrists in Canada's political future. It's sold out. I'll see some of you there.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.